Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about Stranger Things. This is a Netflix original series, if you haven't heard of it yet, and I strongly recommend it. Originally, I tried to do a recording of this video where I talked about the whole thing and didn't give away any spoilers, and I realized this was terribly futile. So this video is actually going to contain a lot of spoilers. I will say, prior to releasing any spoilers, the whole thing, the setup is that there are these... There's an A-B plotline on this thing. There's this group of kids, these really nerdy, like, 12-year-olds, that play D&D, and then there's, like, this police chief. And between the two of them, there's this kid that disappears, and, like, the police chief is trying to figure out where this kid got to. And the kid's friends are trying to figure out what happened to him as well. And throughout the whole thing, there's all kinds of weird supernatural stuff that goes on, monsters and government stuff, and all kinds of interesting things. Every episode is about, like, an hour-ish long, and it's about 8 episodes, I think, so, you know, you could get through it in about a week if you wanted to watch an episode every night. I recommended it to Claudia, and she watched it up to a certain point, and it was funny, because this was the same point that the show started to bug me, but she watched it up to a certain point, and she was like, I couldn't keep watching it anymore. The monster freaked me out, like, it was keeping me up. And this is funny, because at the same point that she got to, the part that did that to her, I also wound up like having I had bad dreams about this creature. So it does some things well. It's got some funny writing, some little plot holes here and there. It's got some good like things you can make fun of because they have some weird logical farts. But it's a good show. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. And anyway, though, from this point forward, I'm going to actually go into spoilers because it was just like I said, it was futile to get really into this whole thing and joke about stuff without actually expounding on the plot elements that you need to see to make the thing work. So anyway, though, moving right along, if you're still here, if you're still okay with spoilers or you've already seen the series, there was a lot of things that I really liked about this deal. There was some really good writing elements. But there was a couple of things that I thought were really funny. One of them was like in the earliest episode, they have this little girl and she escapes from this laboratory, you know, and she's like she's a psychically powered little girl. Her head is shaved all bald, and she's freaking out. And presumably, I assume she ran away not because she got tired of being abused or used as a tool, because she didn't know life in any other way, but because she opened up this portal to an alternate dimension, and that was terribly scary, and she decided she needed to be as far away from that business as possible. So she runs off, and she gets picked up by this guy in a diner, who's like, are you lost? Like, whose kid are you? And so he calls the cops, and he's just like, hey, I got this kid. And so the government agency that was experimenting on this kid shows up to his diner, and like, they come in, they're like, hello, I'm with Child Protective Services, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, come on in. And he buys it, you know, hook, line, and sinker. He totally falls for it, and so he, like, opens up the door, and they walk in, and then they pull out a gun and they shoot him. And this kind of cracked me up, because then the girl sees that he's been shot, and she goes, oh no, they're coming to take me. And so 2 other guys come in the back way, and they intercept the girl, and the girl kills them both. L11 is her name. I suppose I'll talk about this as if maybe you haven't seen it, in case you're just someone who doesn't care about spoilers. You know, but if you've seen it, then you know who I'm talking about. But anyway, so this girl, her name is 11. She's obviously like experiment number 11. They call her L for short. Anyway, though, so L, you find out that while she was down in the lab, like they tried to get her to kill a cat. And this was humorous because they gave her like a stuffed cat toy. And so this was her thing, like she cuddled this stuffed cat when she went to bed, you know, it was like a little comfort tool. And then they brought her out to the laboratory and they were like, all right, destroy this cat. And so she's just sitting there like looking at this cat while the cat's like growling at her and freaking out. And then she's like, I can't kill Kitty, you know, I cannot kill Kitty. And so they're like, oh, all right, well, you're gonna get punished. And so the orderlies try to drag her off and put her in like an isolation room. And so she breaks both their necks, and then the lab leader comes up to her, and he's just like, oh, that was so good. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. So they were training her to murder, you know. They're just like, oh, who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? You murdered the orderlies. So right off the bat, they were kind of setting themselves up for trouble, because I think as soon as you start to reward a child for exercising their extraordinary power to murder the people around her, you know, there's not a lot of good places you can go from there. I mean, like, you know, most parenting books encourage you not to reward destructive behavior like, you know, drawing on the walls. Murdering people is one of those things that just, I don't think a single parenting book, like maybe the parenting book of like Cor the Murder Barbarian. I don't know. Maybe that encourages it. Like yes, yes, teach them that there is no sanctity in human life. But anyway, though, they do this to her. They train her to be cool and like not just cool with murdering people, but like to feel rewarded for it. And so as soon as she gets loose, like they come after her. And they shoot this guy right in front of her, and then they try to intercept her in the back, and they've got guns as well. And so she just, like, without hesitation, just murders these guys, like, breaks their necks, and then runs out the back door. And so, this part of the show, this was, like, within the first episode or two. Or I guess it was the second episode. And it really just cracked me up, because it demonstrated this weird level of incompetence. Like, what the writers were trying to do is they were trying to establish that this government organization was, like, operating outside the law, and that they were badass and dangerous. You know, like they come in and they just kill somebody right off the bat. That was your introduction to this government agency. They just come in and boom, kill this innocent man who was looking out for a kid. You know, and so like the impression that you're supposed to get is that these people are evil. But the impression I got was that they were stupid. And that they weren't very well trained, and that they probably weren't receiving an adequate amount of funding because their staff was really dull-witted. Because after that, they quit being on such a hair trigger. Like, they actually got into a situation where they ran into people again, or they had situations again where they could just as pointlessly kill somebody, and they didn't. Which makes me think that they shot that guy in the diner, and then afterward they must have had to sit down, they must have had a meeting. They sat down, and they were like, alright. So we walked in, he thought we were with Child Protective Services, Plan A was working, and then we shot him. like Steve, and then two of our guys died because the child got scared. Steve, what did we learn? Yeah, Steve in the back. Don't shoot the people we're talking to. Don't shoot the people we're talking to. Yes, Steve. And they write it up on the blackboard. Do not shoot people. Plan A is working. Do not shoot the person we're talking to, okay? Like, we have a badge. They respect the authority. Like, oh, what if they don't cooperate? Well, then we can work from there. So yeah, so they must have had this team meeting because later on, like, at opportunities to kill again, they didn't kill again. So, yeah, that must have been like that was just, this is why we don't murder people on a regular basis. Shoot. I guess that what must have happened is the government agency, they saw the child kill people and she got praised. And so the other government agents were like, "Oh yeah, killing people is good." Like that girl killed people and she got a cookie. So yeah, they just walked in, boom, shot him. Like, how come I didn't get praised? Well, you didn't do it with your mind, Steve. You didn't do it with your brain. If you'd killed that guy with your brain, we all would have given you a pat on the back and like a gift card for I don't know, JC Penney. I don't know. So yes, yeah, little bit of interesting thing there. But the girl runs off and she stumbles into the boys, the 12-year-old boys who are friends with that kid who went missing. And so this is how we establish our sort of A-B plot, is that Elle runs into these kids and this gives them their leads so that they can sort of get around and figure out where things are going. And then of course you've got this cop that's also trying to investigate the death of the child, and one of his friends, like this diner guy was actually one of his friends, so he like they set it up to make it look like he killed himself in a suicide. And this whole thing is actually set back before, you know, the age of cell phones or anything like that. So they're using like, you know, old style walkie-talkies and everything. And one thing I really like about this show though is that it sets itself back in the past and it actually uses a soundtrack that kind of reflects that, which is funny. Like there's a lot of synth and stuff like that. Like you don't hear that very much anymore. Synth used to be all the rage back in like the 90s and 80s, and then that kind of fell out of vogue. But this uses like a lot of synth, and it's pretty good synth. Like it's good at setting the mood and it's kind of cool. So yeah, that was a neat little touch of the show. Yeah. But anyway, though, so these kids run into Elle, and Elle explains that their friend is trapped on the Upside Down, which is essentially this alternate dimension, which the kids refer to as what is it? It's like the dead dimension or something like that. I can't remember what exactly they called it. The dark dimension. The dark dimension. It was something generic. Like the kids were really big D&D nerds. And it was kind of funny because all the kids, they were very, very nerdy. And I have to appreciate that they were written well in the fact that they behave like 12-year-olds without being totally insufferable. Because that's a thing that I see a lot in media. Like, we get kids, and a lot of times writers want to make them, like, overly precocious, or just completely obnoxious because they're too stupid. But these kids, like, they were little sparks of intelligence, but they really didn't put like two and two together and see like, oh, here's an idea, and here's what would be dangerous about that idea, so we would have to plan ahead for the danger. They kind of just like saw like, oh, here's an idea, like we figured this thing out, and then they would start to act on their plan. So like they were doing things, and like it was, as an adult, you'd be watching this and you'd be like, no, don't do that, like don't do that. And so the kids were kind of like our Scooby-Doo types who were like figuring things out, and you were really worried that they were going to actually figure things out, because they had every intention of being like, no, we're super secret spy squad, we're totally going to like go down here, and we're totally like, this is going to work for us. And the kids had no plan. In fact, one thing that I really loved is in the finale of this thing, is they had like a slingshot, right? And like prior to this monster, like they'd established that this monster was able to survive like stupid amounts of impact damage and things like that. They set it on fire, they got it in a bear trap, they shot it, they did everything with it, and then finally it gets to the kids, and the kids haven't actually seen this thing being fought really at all. Like, no one's tried to take it down that they've really seen, except for maybe once. I think some people fired bullets at it, that didn't work. And so they get out a slingshot. And that was like their plan, is they assumed it was going to be like a David and Goliath thing. Like they had, this is our weapon. And so they got out a slingshot, and they were just pelting it with like rocks. And this thing didn't care like at all. Just like, oh, like whatever. I've survived bullets. I can withstand a rock. So, yeah, so it was kind of funny. It was sort of like this was their whole 12-year-old plan, as they assumed that this one slingshot would be enough to handle the problem. And what they were really facing down was like it was just something straight out of hell, They were like level 0 commoners, and they were fighting like a level 14 archfiend or something like that. So to follow with the D&D analogies. But they had a couple of things in there. Like, for example, they were like, well, how would you travel to the under upside down? And they were like, oh, you have to cast like Dark Walk or something like that. And I thought that was funny, because there's an actual spell in D&D, I believe, if I remember correctly, called like Planeswalk, and there's some other spells related. And so it was funny because they were like referencing D&D but not directly using any of the terms, I think because of the copyrights. Like they couldn't actually get away with that, so they were like, yes, Dark Walk, as opposed to Planeswalk. And yeah, so the kids understood this whole thing through this lens of like role-playing games, and they thought that, this is kind of how this works, and so we're the heroes, and the good guys win in the end and all that. Yeah. But anyway, though, so Punch Cop, though, the other side of this thing was Punch Cop. And I call him Punch Cop. This was the police chief. I can't remember his actual name, because he became Punch Cop to me. And the reason I call him Punch Cop is because Punch Cop started to investigate. And at some point, the boy's corpse just shows up in the lake. And what this is they faked his corpse. Is they were like, oh, no, we found him in the lake. And so they pull him out of there, and he was like stuffed full of cotton. And I guess that like while he was down, I don't know why cotton. I would have thought like sawdust would make more sense for like a fake body, but whatever. Cotton. And so yeah, they stuffed this body full of cotton, and they pull it out, and they're like, oh, we found it. And so Punch Cop is like, oh, okay, well, like I'll go ahead and I'll do all the formal stuff and investigate and whatever. And these government guys are like, no, it's all right, we got it. We'll do all the investigation. We'll do all the former stuff. We'll save you the paperwork. And then he's like, well, that's not really how it works. And so he goes to investigate, and instead of like doing any of the things that you might expect a cop to do, like I was used to watching The Wire, like we'd been watching The Wire previously to watching this show, to watching Stranger Things, and so I was used to like the cops, like the procedurally, not the procedural, excuse me, the I guess the procedural criminal investigation thing, like you get a wiretap or whatever, and of course this little like tiny small town police department would have never been able to afford real wiretaps, but I expect that like actual investigation, and like here's a clue, and I'm tailing this guy, and I find out this and I find out that, but no, not Punch Cop. Punch Cop just went straight down to this morgue, and he goes up, and the state trooper's like sitting out there, and the state trooper's like, yeah, what do you need, buddy? And he's like, well, I want to go back there. And he's like, well, I can't let you go back there. So Punch Cop just hits him, like just punches him in the face, and then goes back there, and he gets out a knife, and he carves open what might be a child's dead body. And then he finds all the stuffing in it, and he's like, aha, I knew it. And so then he runs off, and after that, everything just becomes punching. Like, he drops all pretenses of like, oh yeah, no, I'm gonna like arrest this or do that. It just becomes like total frontier justice. Like he's running around, and like people are like, hey sir, you can't be down there, and he just hits him, keeps going. somebody intercepts him, and they're like, what are you doing down here? Are you supposed to be down here? And he goes, yeah, I'm Jim. I'm Punch Cop. You know, I was specifically requested to come down here. And so the guy goes to his radio and he goes, hello, I've got Punch Cop down here. And Punch Cop punches him. Well, he's on the phone, and so the guy falls unconscious, and then he like steals the badge of this other armed guy, and he's like, "I'm Punch Cop. You didn't see anything." And so he goes back into the restricted area, shoots the door thing so that the door can't open, and then he goes down and he finds this interdimensional portal. And this was the part where I realized that they must have had a team meeting, because the government agents actually they surround Punch Cop and then they tranquilize him. And so that, like, he wakes up the next morning, and they've, like, set him free. And immediately, he's like, oh, no, like, I've been kidnapped by a government agency, and he starts looking for a bug, and then he finds the bug. And this was a really weird plot hole, because, like, why did they bug his apartment if they didn't intend to keep close surveillance on him, is the thing. Because, I mean, like, he trashes his apartment looking for this bug, and then he finally finds it, and he disables it. You know, so this government agency should be aware that Punch Cop got all the way down into their super secret lab, saw a doorway to an alternate dimension, got tranquilized, returned to his home, then found the bug in his room, and then they lose track of him. He just vanishes from their radar. So, the guy at the diner didn't know anything. Like, the guy at the diner thought he was talking to Child Protective Services, and he was about to hand over this child experiment to the evil people that were conducting the child experiments without ever knowing what he was doing was wrong. Like, it would have happened, like, they would have been like, give us the child, and he would have been like, okay, here's the child, and they would have left, and he would have, like, gone home that night thinking he'd done a good deed, none the wiser, like, he didn't know he wouldn't recognize those people, like, you know, that would have been it. It would have been solid. And they shot him. But the guy who came downstairs and saw everything, and, like, knew everything, they tranquilized him and let him go like he was a fish that they didn't have the proper, like, license to fish for. They're like, oh, no, this guy's too big. We gotta throw him back. Or too small or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what it was. The other guy just was, like, you know, within their weight limit, and they're just like, yeah, no, we've got regulation to shoot this guy. He's, like, 210 pounds. This guy's only 200. We gotta let him go. So, yeah. So that was my only theory for that, my only explanation in my head for why they would kill a guy who knew nothing, but release a guy who knew too much, was that they'd killed a guy who knew nothing, had a team meeting about it, resolved that they would not kill again because it was a massive headache and they didn't know how to deal with this if they were doing it all the time. And then when a guy came down there that they really actually should have killed and they would have had grounds to kill because he was armed and dangerous and he was hitting people. And like, there was every reason to kill this guy in a normal situation, and they didn't kill him. So they must have, like, they just must have been like, never again. Like, they took away they took the bullets out of everyone's guns or something like that. And they're just like, and then after that, they were like, all right. From now on, we're gonna have, like, a specific code, and if it's okay to kill somebody, we're gonna say that code, okay? So they must have had They must have had another meeting after that. I can't imagine that they, like, be like, oh god, he got all the way down here? Yeah. And then you let him go? Yeah, but don't worry, his apartment is bugged. Okay, well, let's check the bug. Seems he's found and disabled the bug. Oh, and he's gone from the premise. Shoot! We're the worst organization ever! And, yeah, so Punch Cop is free on the world with all the information that he has. And then, meanwhile, though, like I say, they've got this monster that comes through the walls. And this is, like, the creepiest thing. Like, this was the thing, like, the episode where they actually finally have the monster come out of the walls and demonstrate that it's, like, a scary threat that can just reach you at any time. That was when I had nightmares about the thing. Like, I went to bed, and I had bad dreams about this thing. Like, this monster is legitimately creepy. They do a really good job with this. And they actually maintained that up until close to the finale, or if not the finale itself. And the reason, the point where they lost me is because there's a point where I believe that they had a man in a suit. You know, he was a monster suit. And they did an editing trick, and I caught it, though. I caught onto it. And it wasn't that they did anything really particularly bad. It was just that I recognized, like, that's a man in a suit, and they're doing an editing trick to try and hide the fact that it's a man in a suit. I think it was they set him on fire or something like that. And it was, you know, it obscured him, you know, they didn't, like, because otherwise it was kind of like a lot of computer graphics and stuff like that. And because it was doing things like coming out of the walls, it had this kind of you know, they would put it in like dark places where there was like lots of debris in the air and things like that, and all this kind of helped it make look more convincing and more scary. You know, there's like lots of good stuff that kind of worked, that kind of made this monster work. But then when they set it on fire, I'm pretty sure it was just a guy in a suit, and they just set him on fire. And the trouble was is that like him being on fire sort of obscured that it was a guy in a suit, but there was something about the shot that I just looked at it and I was like, man in a suit. Like, sure, man in a suit. And the monster sort of lost some of its oomph then, because after that, he was a man in a suit to me, to some extent. And yeah. But it turns out the monster's a little bit unkillable. And this kind of bugged me, is when I thought that, at first I thought it could be hurt, because they set it on fire and I thought that they chopped off its leg. But it turns out that it was actually fine. I mean, they'd hurt it, I guess, but it didn't seem very hurt, and it got over it really quick. And they could apparently fill it full of like bullets, and it would be just fine. Yeah. But anyway, though, they get to the end of the whole thing. Like by the final point of this whole thing, eventually they realize that the kids have got this child experiment with them. Like, I believe that the government agency shows up at this mom's house, and she's like, "Where are your kids? Like, where are your kids? We need to find them. They're protecting a fugitive." And so then Punch Cop finds out about this, and he's like, "The kids! I have to find the kids!" So Punch Cop is more trusted by the community, and so everyone's more willing to talk to him. So Punch Cop just goes and he finds the kids. And so then, like, the plots kind of come together, and the kids wind up out of harm's way because the adults take over, and the kids are no longer, you know, trying to keep the whole thing a secret and do everything for themselves. And then, of course, you also get to reveal that Elle was the one who created the portal, and this is probably why she was running away. Not necessarily because she got tired of being abused, or because she got tired of spying on people, or whatever, but mainly because there was a scary, scary thing that lived down in the same room with her, and she wanted nothing to do with it because it was going to eat her alive. The weird thing, though, and this kind of irked me, is in the end, when they have Elle finally confront the thing, the weird mutual, like, destruction that they do, I feel like... throughout the whole thing, every time she uses her power, like, she bleeds out of her nose and out of her ears, and it makes it seem like it's very taxing on her. Like, she can't just do it over and over and over again. She's not super powered. She's got pretty much, like, one, you know, maybe two in her. Like, she could kill a couple of people, and then after that, it's like, you know, she collapses, she's practically dead. So, when they finally have her confront this thing, she's already used her powers once, and she's already bleeding out of the nose and the ears and everything like that. It was a really bad experience for her. And so then she has to confront this thing. And what I assumed is that she would stop it, she would kill it, and then she would die from the exertion. But weirdly, instead, they just have this effect where she, you know, she waves her hand and they both disappear. And, like, I gotta wonder what the heck is up with that. And I kind of didn't like it. It's possible that what they're doing is they might be setting up Elle to come back, because the whole thing ends on a big cliffhanger, and I kind of feel like maybe they'll do a good job and she'll come back and she'll be okay, but it could also be really silly, because the show has demonstrated some really solid writing ability, but it's also demonstrated some really stupid writing ability. It's been a mix of both. It's fun. It's a really good show, and I really like it. The acting is solid. Like, the kids are written well. They read like kids and all that. But it's a little bit pulpy. It's a little bit like you have to kind of suspend your disbelief from time to time, because when you really start to examine the behavior of some of the people in this show, you realize that they're behaving really irrationally. Like, and not just Punch Cop, but like virtually everybody. I mean, I don't know. The most sensible people in the show were probably some of the least likable, because they were focused on their own, like, mundane crap. And everyone else was like, "You don't understand." And they were like, "No, look, like, taxes. And I need to get my oil changed," and stuff like that. And they're just, like, in the way, because they're like, "No, like, hang on, we have to get our oil changed, like, Monday." And they're like, "No, you don't understand. Monday is the day that I have to go out and do this supernatural thing." And they were like, "Yeah, but if we don't get the oil changed, the car's going to be, you know, like, it's going to explode. Engine's going to die, and that's super expensive." So, yeah. So the more rational people, they were, like, assholes. And they were actually intentionally assholes. It wasn't, well... They were set up to look like assholes, and you know, one of them kind of redeemed himself in the end. He got in a fight with one of the other characters, and this was a little interesting, because instead of being angry and coming back and more willing to fight, he got his ass kicked. And then later on he came back and he's like, "Yeah, I've been kind of licking my wounds, and I realized that maybe I behaved in an inappropriate way, and I'm really sorry." So it was funny, like, he learned something from an ass kicking, and you don't see that very often. Yeah, but anyway though, if they set Elle to come back, I hope that they come back with a second season because I really like this show. They ended on a cliffhanger. They're implying that they're setting up for another one. It was a good enough show that I want to see more from it. If they bring Elle back, I really hope they do a good job with it. That the writing is good. Like I say, it's fun and I really like it. I don't trust them entirely. Like I trust them to be interesting, but I also trust them to be a little bit stupid. So like I'll enjoy the stupid. The stupid was funny and endearing. But you know, it could be a little bit, her return could be a little bit pulpy, a little bit you know, a little bit like a superhero kind of you know, like a cape comic sort of thing. We're just like, yes, no, I'm fine. Like you know, these weird things. But the horror elements were fun. Like I said, kept me up at night. Claudia was telling me she couldn't keep watching the thing because it spooked her out too much, and so like the last episode that she saw, I watched with her, and yeah, it's a fun show. It's too late to recommend. I've spoiled most of the stuff, but I mean, if you watch this through and let yourself be spoiled, and you haven't actually seen it, I still recommend that you watch the show. It's pretty cool. There's some twists and turns that I didn't give away, and even just to catch up on some things. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I have some thoughts on stuff, but I would have to see like the next season to really figure out where they're trying to go with things, because they don't provide closure on everything. For one thing, I don't think they ever closed the portal. Like, that portal to an alternate dimension, I believe it's just down there, and I think that everyone who had responsibility for watching after that portal, I think they're dead. Based on the finale, I think they all died. Like, Elle killed half of them, and the monster killed the other half, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you don't see everybody die, but basically, everyone that you had a face and a name, they all died. So, yeah, lots of kind of open-ended stuff. You know, lots of questions unanswered, lots of things they could do, places they could go, and yeah. So anyway, Supernatural. I suppose that'll be it for today. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.